Are you sure?
Here's the 30-second lesson on what legends know. Never ask a bride why she's getting married. Don't wear a skirt on a windy day. Deodorant is not a shower. Don't sniff chili flakes. And don't forget, saving is not investing. Legends don't just save, they invest in mutual funds. Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
It's been an expectant and nervous 48 hours since the Iranian missile attacks on Israel. As we know, about 180 ballistic missiles were fired at Israel. However, the important thing is these were not ballistic missiles that were scattered all over Israel. These were carefully chosen targets. So basically, three Air Force bases, Israeli Air Force bases, and the Mossad headquarters in Tel Aviv. It happens to be located almost in the heart of Tel Aviv. You can drive past it often. In better times, I think you could drive past very close to it as well. It's just that the city is grown around it. So these were targeted attacks, and Israelis are claiming that they stopped most of these. Iranians, of course, say, "See, we got our targets right. This was this was a case of precision strikes." That said, the fact is that because these clusters of missiles came at selected targets, if these were scattered all over Israel, maybe it would have been more possible to stop them. But when so many come at one target, then air defenses do tend to get overwhelmed. The best of air defenses will get overwhelmed, and some missiles got through. So that's what happened. The air of expectancy and nervousness comes from the fact that everybody knows that something will now happen. What will happen? When will it happen? What will be the upshot and outcome of it, or the further escalation? Will it lead to an escalatory spiral, or will there be some kind of a stop or a halt at some point? Nobody knows, right? And that is why this nervousness. But we can be sure that something will happen. That said, let me start out by suggesting some readings to you. I will then go over some questions and discuss some answers to those. But some readings here are important. So there is this Financial Times article from James Shorter with Jerusalem byline, headlined How Israel Could Retaliate Against Iran. Then William Broad in Science. Broad is the NYT's science correspondent, a very well respected byline. To build a bomb, Iran would need much more than 2 weeks. So a lot of people have said, oh, Iran will now get a nuclear bomb in no time. Pakistan was said to be one turn of the screwdriver away. Maybe Iran is two or three turns of the screwdriver away. This article argues that no, it's not a few weeks, it's not even a few months, it can be several months or probably a year or more, because it's not enough just to have the uranium, even if you can enrich uranium, not enough just to have the uranium, you need the engineering, metallurgy, etc., to put it all together in a feasible, deliverable bomb that you can be sure of. There's no point delivering it dud and then be hit by real nukes and retaliation. Third thing we recommend that you read is Arash Azizi's piece in Atlantic. Its headline, Iran is not yet ready for war with Israel. Fourth is a very good data piece, very good data analysis. There is no opinion there from IranWatch.org. This is a table of Iran's missile arsenal. Plus, if you're really a nerdy type and want to go into more details, go to the footnotes and endnotes. You will find many other links that you can check out. One of those links I am sharing with you as a standalone, also with the description, because that is very interesting. And if you're a nerd, you're going to love it because it has graphics and it has pictures. That is called the Defense Intelligence and Ballistic Missiles Committee's report for 2020, DIBMAC 2020. Defense Intelligence and Ballistic Missiles Analysis Committee is run by the US National Air and Space Intelligence Center. So that report I'm sharing with you. And finally, there's a story from Reuters giving an analysis location of the nuclear installations in Iran, because there is talk about the possibility of Israel now targeting Iranian nuclear facilities, if not now, then in the course of time. So these are the things that I thought are important readings. I have read through these also, and I feel a little bit more confident talking about. So first, because it's a very complicated story. Second, it's a moving story. So this is like shooting at a moving target. And third, it's a story that involves not just many powers, and nobody knows how their minds work, because there are some unpredictable powers, some steady powers, and some unpredictable powers in this mix, but also because technologies get to be very complex. And from this also we'll see what lessons we can draw from India. So let me start, having prescribed these readings for you. Let me start with 6 questions and we'll talk around them. So the first question is, what did Iran want and what did it achieve? Number two, what did Israel want and what did it achieve and what does it want to achieve now? Because Israelis would have anticipated these Iranian attacks at some point of time, or some form of Iranian attacks. Part of this also is, how were these attacks different from the April attacks, April 15 attacks earlier this year? Next, third question, what does it tell about the strength and limitations of Iran, particularly Iranian missiles? And what is it that we could expect from Iran in case of a retaliation, a re-retaliation from Israel? Number four, the nuclear factor. Where does the nuclear factor come in? Is it a positive factor? Is it a negative factor? Should we all be scared or should we all be a little bit reassured because of the nuclear factor? Number five is the Islamic factor, because Iran, the Palestinians, Hezbollah, Hamas, Houthis, this is an Islamic alliance. This is Iran's way of building an axis of resistance or a ring of fire around Israel. But this is also part of the larger competition in the Islamic world, because Iran is saying through these proxies that, look, if all you sovereign Muslim nations don't come and help us or don't join us because you see us as being anti-West and you are aligned with the West, namely America, right? Or if you want to address it in Shia-Sunni basis or Arab-Persian basis, then we are here and we provide a larger tent for all anti-Israeli and Western forces to come in. So the Islamic factor. And the sixth question is the lessons for India. Now let's go over one by one. First of all, what did Iran want and what did Iran achieve? So Iran wanted, first of all, to tell its proxies and the rest of the world, in naak ka sawal tha, because Iranians were getting humiliated all the time. People were killed. Their honored guests were killed in Tehran. Their top nuclear scientist was killed. As far back as in 2010, a software called Stuxnet was used. It was a military-grade spy software that was used to make Iran's centrifuges go crazy, whereby they'd all started spinning crazily and got ruined. So Iran has suffered all these serial humiliations, and now with the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran and now Hassan Nasrallah in Beirut, and before that, many other number twos, number threes, number fours of these organizations, Hamas and Hezbollah, then the bombings of Houthis, at the same time, now the operations in Lebanon. So Iran faced a prospect where all its proxies were under attack, and we had dedicated a full episode of Kartak Tata to this, that, if all your proxies are being hit, then you will be obligated. The expectation will be that you will go out and defend them. And if you don't go out to defend them, people will laugh at you. And more importantly, not only will your adversaries laugh at you, but even your friends will start either laughing at you or start looking sideways at, look, these guys brought me into this fight, right? So I'm their dog in the fight. So the friends would say, proxies in this case, that, look, we only came into this fight. You brought us into this fight as your proxies. So we are your dog in this fight. I use the expression dog purely in a metaphorical sense. So we are your dog in the race, but you don't act like you fight for this dog. What's the point then? We are being used as gun fodder. So Iran had the compulsion to respond. And that response came. Now, this was essentially different from April, because April you had this ridiculous scenario of all these drones starting from more than 1,000 kilometers away. The whole world could see them. There were a few missiles, a few ballistic missiles. There were many cruise missiles which travel much slower, and because they have to go much longer distances, their warheads have to become much weaker as well. Between Israel and the allies, that the Western allies, mostly US, Britain, and France, but also Arab allies who will cringe if they heard the expression allies, but everybody knows it. Jordan, Saudi Arabia, UAE, everybody got involved because these missiles, all projectiles from Iran have to fly over these territories, right? So they also became party to interception and almost nothing got through. However, remember, even in that case also, one odd that got through hit the same Nevatim air base which has been hit this time. Nevatim air base, see this map. This map tells you the main Israeli air bases, particularly the air bases that this time the Iranians hit. Most of these are towards the south of Israel. They are not towards the north. They are not close to the West Bank areas. They are not close to Jerusalem. They are mostly close to the southern areas in the Negev Desert. Negev Desert, the Nevatim air base, which has been the favorite target of the Iranian missiles now, that one hosts the bulk of Israel's F-35 fighters, the frontline stealth fighters of Israel Air Force, the pride of Israel Air Force. That also hosts, as you would expect, the bulk of Israel's electronic intelligence or airborne warning and control system aircraft. These are large aircraft. Also, a large number of Israeli refuelers. Those things are very important. If you are a small country, but you want a range that takes you to very distant places, Iraq, Iran, anywhere. The important thing is that this airbase, which is the Nevatim airbase, which is the main target of attacks, this is not far from Dimona, Israel's preeminent military nuclear reactor. That's where Israel's nuclear weapons grade fuel comes from. That is the home of Israeli nuclear weapons program. So right now we have no evidence. Nobody has made this claim, and nobody is saying it. Nobody is even alleging it. Not even the Israelis are alleging that any of the missiles were directed at the reactor. However, the Israelis have shown, one, that their targeting is very good. So all these missiles reached their targets and they did not stray here and there and go and kill civilians anywhere. So first of all, the brownie point that we did not try to hit civilians. The Israelis hit civilians all the time. Number two, we only hit Mossad, which plots all these assassinations and killings and all this other action in Gaza and Lebanon and in Tehran and elsewhere. So Mossad headquarters, although that missile fell almost a kilometer away from the Mossad headquarters, but also the air bases where most of the raids on Lebanon and Gaza have been launched, including the raid that killed Hassan Nasrallah. That was launched from Nevatim Air Base. Now, given the number of air bases Israel has in a very small country, you would expect these air bases to be doing all of this stuff. The important thing, however, is that Iranian targeting was quite precise. So these missiles were not as crude as these are made out to be. Iran has achieved a certain level of targeting expertise. So Iran did deliver a message. The underlying message here also is that, look, you have the world's best 8-layer or 8 into 5 layer, because 8 levels of defense here, then 5 levels of intelligence, right? In spite of that, ballistic missiles get through. What if one of these ballistic missiles had a nuclear warhead, right? So, in case Iran gets nuclear weapons, all bets will be off. That's one. So, that messaging comes through. The second thing that comes through is that if we really wanted to give you pain, then instead of targeting your military installations, which are very well protected, we could have targeted your inhabited areas, your urban areas, because you target inhabited areas in Lebanon and in Gaza. We could have also done that. That's also messaging from the Iranian part. And as we go along, you will also hear some Iranian officials talking about this. The third thing is, I see it also said some places that maybe the Iranians deliberately used lesser warheads, lesser weight of warheads to create less damage. That's not quite true. See these videos on your screen. You've seen them on social media last few days on TV channels as well. See the size of these explosions. These are missiles hitting mostly the Nevatim air base. These don't look like explosions caused by tiny warheads. These look like the warheads of maximum warheads that missiles of these ranges, low-tech missiles of these ranges used by Iran would contain, because the more you extend the range of your missile, because you add more fuel and more stages, you have to reduce the weight of your warhead. So there was no effort to reduce the weight of the warhead. It just so happens, because we're talking about what did Iran want and what did it achieve. If it wanted to, first of all, it has achieved a talking point to say that, yay, right, you couldn't stop everything. Your Iron Dome broke and our missiles got through. Correct. Missiles got through. Not all got through. Some got through. Enough got through to make these videos. Number two, that our targeting was precise. Point taken. That point also Iran has scored. Number three, that we did not target any civilian installations. That point also is made and correct. That point also goes to Iran. However, did they cause any damage to Israeli Air Force? That's where there is no match between Iranian claims that so many, half of Israel's F-35 force destroyed and all that, because you see this picture, I can't use a high precision picture, but this is a picture available from open source intelligence platforms. This picture tells you of the odd crater in the taxiways at the airbase. Craters in taxiways are craters on runways and craters on taxiways are routine in warfare on air bases. They can be filled usually within a few hours. You also see the odd building. These are not underground shelters, but you see the odd building hit, the roof hit, damage to the roof, but you don't see any debris or fire or fuel burning, which would be the case if any aircraft housed inside it were hit. So once again, the understanding is that the strikes were precise. These missiles got into a very highly protected airbase. However, besides maybe some damage to Israeli Air Force's pride or Israeli air defense's pride, this has not caused any more substantive damage. So that's where we come to. It has not degraded Israel's ability to carry out any operations even for a few hours. So that answers our larger question. Second, Israel was expecting this. They had also known that Iran this time might use ballistic missiles, because ballistic missiles are very difficult to stop. They go beyond the atmosphere and then they come back under the force of gravity. By the time they're coming back at you, they are sometimes 5 times the speed of sound. It's very difficult to stop them, and they are very potent. So Israel would have still expected to stop all of them, also to one, to reassure its population, and second, to keep the image of its invincibility. I would say to about 90-95% they achieved that, but the fact that 5 to 10% missiles got through, that is a matter of great concern for Israel, and to that extent a little setback to them as well. What is it they would want now is that if we know their method and style, not only will they want to retaliate, but they would like to retaliate in a way that looks like they've delivered much greater damage than what the Iranians did in this case. In mid-April, with that ineffectual symbolic Iranian attack, Israelis were also content to carry out a symbolic counterattack. They attacked a very important Iranian air defense system at Isfahan Air Base. It was a standalone attack on the Isfahan Air Base, just on that air defense system, want to show their capability that we know where you are, you have no place to hide, we can reach you, but Israel did not escalate it. This time, what will they do? And that is a matter of debate that we'll come to as we go along. Number three now, what are the strengths and limitations of Iran? So Iran's strength is these ballistic missiles. Now, how many does Iran have? I've read up everything. American sources, British sources, dedicated websites that track Iran like iranwatch.org. Nobody is willing to give you even an estimate of numbers of the missiles the Iranians have. They just have a lot of missiles. However, to be able to sustain barrages like this, say 200 ballistic missiles at a time. 200 ballistic missiles is a lot of missiles. If you look at India's medium-range missiles, for example, say Agni 1 and Agni 2, at this point, I see this 2020 DIB MSc report, the Defense Intelligence and Ballistic Missile Analysis Committee report. This says, in fact, that by 2020, India has less than 10 Agni 2 and Agni 3 deployed. Maybe by this time they are 20 and 4 and 5 not yet deployed. So no country has enormous numbers of missiles. So having used 180, maybe they can use 200 in the next one, maybe 200 in the next one, but at some point they will run out of missiles, particularly missiles of this range. Nobody has unlimited missiles. However, if If Iran were to be attacked by Israel, either with ballistic missiles, which I think is unlikely because one, a nuclear weapons power using ballistic missiles thinks several times before doing so. We know that the Russians are doing so in Ukraine, but that's a different situation from Israel and Iran because Iran is a nearly nuclear weapons power. It's also a large Islamic nation. So Israel will think about it before using ballistic missiles. However, with Israel, you never know, and with Netanyahu's Israel, in any case, you never know. Anything's possible. But even if Israel were to get its submarines into, say, the Arabian Sea or the Persian Gulf, and they were to fire cruise missiles at the Iranian oil facilities. That is one of the possibilities that I see being discussed in the global media. Even if that were to happen, Iran's ability to stop any of those, to stop either cruise missiles or ballistic missiles, is very, very limited, infinitesimal, if any. Will the Russians jump in to help? I would have my doubts because Russians are busy and Russians also know the kind of escalation this will cause. In fact, in Syria, Russians and Iranians have been operating on the same side, but they've been very careful so far. Iranians have also, so far, Israelis have also been very careful. In fact, the story is, and it's a widely believed story, that when the Israelis attack a facility in Damascus or any part of Syria, which they know the Russians are sharing with the Iranians, they let the Russians know a few minutes ahead, so Russians get their people and their things out of the way. So unlikely the Russians will come in. In any case, Russian capability in that area is limited. They can't be shifting much of that to Iran in a hurry, and unlikely that that will happen. So these are the limitations of Iran. Next is the nuclear factor. Now, I told you earlier on that Iran's also trying to tell Israel that, look, so many of these missiles got through. Suppose one of these had the nukes. So right now, that concern is not there because everybody knows that Iran does not have the nukes. But if Iran had the nukes, so what happens between two countries if they have nuclear weapons? So once again, when two countries have nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles become an almost useless weapon. Why? Please watch this discussion between Snehesh Alex Philip, our defense editor, and former Lieutenant General P.R. Shankar, who's retired Director General of Artillery, also runs a wonderful platform called Gunner Shot. The point made is very simple, that when two nuclear weapon powers, if one fires a ballistic missile on the other, how does the other make a presumption that this is not nuclear tipped? And if it is nuclear tipped, at which point do I launch a counter? Do I first wait for myself to be hit and then find out was it nuclear or not? Maybe too late for me. So the inclination would be to retaliate when the wretched thing is in midair. So that is why two nuclear weapon powers will be very careful using ballistic missiles between them. If Ukraine had nuclear weapons, Russia would not have been so easily and so lightly using ballistic missiles against them. That's the point I had made also shortly after the Ukraine war began, or shortly after the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that if Ukraine had not given up its nuclear weapons as a result of many of the treaties after the breakup of the Soviet Union, maybe Putin would not have been so emboldened, and he is now. And that also provided justification for countries like India to keep their nuclear option, their nuclear weapons, and their nuclear autonomy as well. So, nuclear factor in this case might actually be a factor of stability and some mutual restraint as well. Then comes the Islamic factor. I reshared with you one of my earlier national interest articles, and that is something that's playing out now. So, all the countries in the world, including Islamic countries, that support the Palestinian cause, that have spoken out, say, on Gaza, none of them is speaking out in defense of Iran now, including against Israel's assassination of Iran's proxies on this side. So you can see that there is a clear divide in the Islamic world. So one world is Iran with its proxies. It doesn't look like any other sovereign Islamic state is fully with the Iranians. You might say at some level Azerbaijan may have some sympathy, but what can Azerbaijan do? Azerbaijanis are buying so many of their drones from the Israelis, right? It's a very complex situation. Azerbaijan, by the way, is the other big Shia nation in the world. It's Iran, Iraq, and Azerbaijan. Nevertheless, Iran is isolated as a sovereign nation. Other Muslim nations are divided both on the basis of Shia and Sunni, but also Arab and Persian, also pro-West and anti-West. So Iran is not able to build an anti-Western coalition of Muslim countries. That is not even Muslim countries elsewhere. Pakistan, if you talk about Muslim unity, for example, this also destroys, completely kills and buries the myth of the Islamic bomb. So Bhutto may have sold that idea to Gaddafi and others in 1973-74 that Pakistan, you give us money, Pakistan will build an Islamic bomb, and he got some help. That's how Lahore's cricket stadium got named Gaddafi Stadium, right? Continued to be called Gaddafi Stadium long after Gaddafi was gone and discredited in his home country. That said, Pakistan is the only Islamic country with nuclear weapons, is not even making a whimper. And nobody even fears or suspects at any point of time that Pakistan's missiles or nuclear weapons could now be available to be used in a Muslim cause. However, the Pakistani politicians, public opinion make a lot of noise about Israel, make a lot of noise about, although the Pakistani public opinion, Pakistani leaders, Pakistani extreme groups, Pakistani Islamist groups make a lot of noise about Israel for the Palestinian cause, but nobody suggests lending Pakistan's nuclear capability to Iran's cause in this case or to Palestinian cause in this case. And finally, the lessons for India. The lessons for India are very important. First of all, I told you that we shouldn't look at everybody else's problem and think this is going to be my problem. So just because Israel gets hit by 200 ballistic missiles, we shouldn't start thinking, oh, what happens? If we get hit by 200 ballistic missiles, what will happen? We have to see, India has to see who India's adversaries are. Pakistan will have a tough time rustling up this many ballistic missiles. And frankly, if any ballistic missiles from Pakistan are launched towards India, India would need to make a very quick calculation on whether we trust the Pakistanis that these are not nuclear, so let these land and then we'll find out, or let's launch on launch, right, as it's called. So the Pakistanis will think 2,000 times before they launch a ballistic missile towards India. The Chinese are a much more dominant power. They are dominant on the borders. They know that conventional war they can't achieve very much. But if they were to target one Indian air base, for example, there will be quite a bit of defensive capability around our critical air bases. And yet, if something gets through, you could also pay the compliment. At the same time, this tells you the vulnerability that every nation now has to ballistic missiles, because ballistic missiles in the hands of any country, even a non-state actor like Houthis, for example, or Hezbollah, those are really deadly weapons because those are very difficult to intercept. Finally, in conclusion, I will share two things with you. Read that James Broad article very carefully. James Broad article, also the other analysis on Iran's nuclear programs. There are 2 or 3 articles that I've shared with you. They all tell you that Iran is quite a distance from producing a credible weapon, because a nuclear weapon has to be credible. If you fire something which goes puss, then you've used your nuclear option and exposed yourself to full-fledged nuclear retaliation by a settled, established nuclear weapons power. So you will not use a nuclear weapon unless you are sure of it. You can't use a nuclear weapon if you have only 1 or 2, and plus you need to test. Israel looks like has not tested, but Israel has crossed those technological barriers a long time back. It's also a high-tech state. For Iran to do it, it will be risky. And next, for it to do this without at least having 6 or 8 bombs, because you can't just fire one bomb. First of all missiles don't get through, so you have to fire a few, hoping that one with the nuclear warhead will get through. And second, when you get hit back, you also need the capability to again retaliate. Without any of that, to think that Iran will use a nuclear weapon, first of all, they might be able to enrich their uranium to a certain degree in the course of time, maybe not in a very long time, but to get the metallurgy right, to get the explosive detonation system right. This is what explodes conventional explosives in such a way that they create sufficient compression on the nuclear core for the nuclear fission to start. For all of that, you need a lot more work to do, or Iranians need a lot more work to do. So all the experts say that Iran is at least a year, if not longer, away from one nuclear bomb. But nobody goes to war with one or two or three or four nuclear bombs, least of all a large, substantive, civilizational state like Iran.